Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Hey, it's Austin James. If you're like me, trying to live your best life while living with diabetes, you can relate to worrying if you're doing a good job managing your diabetes. I use the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor to get real-time glucose readings and see the impact of every meal and activity to make better decisions. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor can help me live life with diabetes on my own terms, and it gives me more time for the things I love, like being a dad and a musician. Now this is progress. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
Welcome to Dear Prudence. I am not your guest, Prudie. My name is Daisy Rosario, and I am a senior supervising producer of audio here at Slate, where I work with Dear Prudence. Now, if you are a regular listener, you would already know that our dear Jenée has been out on maternity leave, and that continues for a little bit longer. But I did feel like maybe we should hear her voice. And so for that reason, we are revisiting this episode that Jenée did earlier in 2024 with Carvell Wallace, who actually also happens to be a Slate host. He is co-host of a wonderful show called How To. The questions in this episode are not holiday specific, but man, the answers and the core problems in them really struck me as something that people might need to hear right around the stressful holiday times. Please enjoy this Encore episode of Dear Prudence.
Welcome to Dear Prudence. I'm your Prudence, Jenée Desmond-Harris. Today we'll be weighing in on readers' questions about how to cancel family vacation plans that sound horrible to you, how to break it to your butch lesbian girlfriend that her friends might be misogynists, and how to convince your parents to let you go to a high school in a not-so-great neighborhood. Here to help me out is New York Times bestselling author and journalist Carvell Wallace. Among other things, he's one of the hosts of Slate's How To podcast, and he's the former co-host of Slate parenting podcast, Mom and Dad Are Fighting, now called Care and Feeding. This May, he released a memoir, Another Word for Love. It's an examination of his experiences growing up Black and queer in America and his perspectives on love and healing. Welcome, Carvell.
Thank you for having me.
So I know you've been on your book tour, and you've probably been having to talk about yourself and your life nonstop.
Nonstop.
I hope this is a good break to talk about other people's lives.
I hope so, because towards the end, I really got sick of my own story. I was like, enough.
I mean, your story is great. Don't get me wrong. Everyone should read it. But I know you must be sick of talking about and answering all the same questions.
Yeah, totally. So this will be a nice break.
Feel free to bring in your own life. But,
Okay.
Mostly we're going to focus on other people and what they're doing wrong.
Okay, sounds good. I love that.
And before we get started, I want to ask you for one piece of unsolicited advice.
Try meditation, even if you don't like it at first. Just see if you can sit in meditation for 2 or 3 minutes a day, and then maybe 5 minutes and maybe 10 minutes. That's my unsolicited advice. And it's hard, and you probably won't be able to do it for that long, and then you'll stop doing it and then try it again and keep trying it as like an ongoing thing. That's my advice.
Okay, I was going to say asking for a friend. What if you've tried it maybe 15, 20, 30 times and you just can't seem to stick with it? Should you keep trying it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that we have that like, oh, it needs to be this, like, you need to keep escalating until you become like someone who can sit on a mountaintop for like, in 40 straight days of meditation. I think that's a mistake. It's just like you tried it 15 times. You haven't done it in like 2 years. Okay, so do it again for 3 minutes on Saturday. And then on Sunday, you forget or you don't feel like it. That's fine. Do it for 2 minutes on Wednesday. Like that it can be treated like that. I think we have a lot of misconceptions about it because America has done this like weird media orientalism thing around it. But actually, it can actually just be a way of engaging with the self that has nothing to do with like ascending. It can be not about ascending, just a way of like having a relationship with the self.
Okay, I'll give it another try. I'm always trying to say I'm busy, but I do probably have 2 minutes a day to spare.
Maybe.
Great advice. And Carvell and I will dive into your questions after a short break. Do you want more Dear Prudence? Subscribe to Slate Plus to immediately unlock weekly bonus episodes. Plus, you'll access ad-free listening across all your favorite Slate podcasts. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/Prudie Plus to get access wherever you listen. Welcome back. You're listening to Dear Prudence, and I'm here with Carvell Wallace. Let's get started with our first letter. It's titled, Too Many Monkeys Jumping on My Head.
I have a large, loving family. I have a good number of friends. I am swamped with plans, and I hate it. Every time someone in my life demands that we celebrate somebody's big milestone, and they are real milestones, or birthday, or travel in a big group somewhere, I immediately feel sick. I do not know how to maintain this many relationships and not completely drown. I would love to actually be closer to individual people, but it's impossible because there's simply too many of them. Over the past 3 weeks alone, there were 2 enormous parties and 2 birthday parties. While there are some lulls in the year, it's kind of like this constantly. It was fine when I was in college because I lived in a different state. I moved back right before COVID and the public health emergency shelter-in-place hit. And then I feel endlessly guilty because I actually genuinely do love these people and want to see and celebrate with them, but there's just too many of them. My social battery is limited and takes forever to charge, a concept that most people in my family don't understand because they're all extreme extroverts. I already do the bare minimum amount of showing up for family stuff, and some will definitely get offended if I don't have a good excuse for not showing up. And I already neglect my friends for family stuff. I'm looking for jobs in a different state already. Do I need to move to a different country? Be less friendly? Lie more? How do I protect my peace, show up for everyone and also myself, and not feel guilty? It feels very damned if I do, damned if I don't.
So I could actually kind of relate to this letter because I used to feel very much the same way. Just always pulled in a million directions, overwhelmed, short on time and energy, feeling like I was never showing up for people enough, but I was also never rested and never had enough alone time. To be fair, I know that when you have a hammer, everything's a nail, or whatever the saying is. And my hammer is that I was recently diagnosed with adult ADHD. And to me, that was a big part of what was going on. The feeling of overwhelmed was coming from inside the house, not from the demands on me. I mean, I remember I used to think, why are people asking me to get lunch during the workday? How can anyone leave their desk?
Right.
This is crazy. You know, like, how could you possibly get, I do not work? Are other people not doing anything?
Right.
Why don't people have things to do and deadlines? And what I actually realized was happening was that everything was taking me a really long time, and everything was feeling incredibly draining to me because everything was a struggle that it didn't need to be. And when everything, daily tasks and work, stopped being such a struggle, I stopped feeling as if people were making unreasonable demands on my time. Not saying that's the answer here, but just throwing it out there.
Well, first of all, I super relate to that experience. I also have an adult ADHD diagnosis, and I do often find myself thinking, why does everyone need so much from me? I'm being put like, you're tearing me apart, Lisa. Like that kind of vibe. I'll get like, and it'll just be one email or one text. And someone will just be like, hey, what are you doing Friday? My friend is having a barbecue. You should come by. And I'm like, leave me alone. You know, but
absolutely.
It's like, all this person did is just invite me to their friend's barbecue. That's how I know that like it has something to do with me too, you know? So obviously we can't diagnose this person, but it does feel like that's something to look at. Maybe it's just you're feeling a little overwhelmed because it's hard for you to navigate a lot of stuff. That said, in terms of the letter, it's one of those ones where it's like, how do I tell people something? And it's like the answer is you tell them.
Right.
You are damned if you do and damned if you don't. Like, actually, that is the situation that you're in because people will take it personally if you don't show up for X, Y, and Z. But you also can't show up for everything. So you have to make decisions about what you can show up for. And it probably will be helpful if you tell people in your life that like you aren't able to show up for everything because you get overwhelmed, you get exhausted, and some people are going to roll their eyes and whatever. But at a certain point, people will just understand that that is one of the things with you. And so they won't take it personally if you don't show up for their thing because they know that this is one of the things with you.
You have to brand yourself as not a party person.
You get to brand yourself as, that's right. Because the problem is if you're dishonest, then you brand yourself as the person who will show up no matter what.
Right.
Now you're always trying to keep sort of plates in the air that actually you don't need to be keeping in the air. So you need to brand yourself as the person who may or may not come. And one example I think of this is there's a certain author who's like a big deal A-list author who I wanted to blurb the book. And we had some mutual like business people. So people were like, well, I'm sure you can go ask this person. But even asking them was like a whole production. They don't have email. You can't call them up. You have to go find them. So I like had to go to a thing and like go this whole ordeal to be in physical proximity with them. And so they've already been branded as like they're probably not going to blurb your book.
Right.
And so I found them at this thing and then was able to get like into a conversation with them and said, look, I'm asking you because I have written this thing and you've expressed before that you would be interested in helping me with something I'm working on. And so I'd like to see if you'd be willing to read the book and possibly blurb it. And the way that they rolled their eyes, honestly, they were just like, oh, I mean,
oh no.
And then they were like, I mean, I will if it's good. And I was like, great. That's all I'm asking for you to take a look at it. It was kind of like, don't get your hopes up, but we'll see. And that was it. What was so great about it was that they were branded all the way from the beginning to the end as like a person. So I didn't have any unrealistic expectations of them.
Right.
It's like they don't like to be bothered. They're not interested in playing this game. They don't blur books if they don't think they're good. You can't reach them by email. They're not going to be on social media. And actually, it worked because I don't mean in terms of getting them to do it. I mean, it worked in terms of helping me accept their behavior, which maybe if someone else who had been branded as like everyone's go-to author friend, if they treated me like that, I would be like offended. What is the meaning of this? What have I done to harm you?
Or if they said they would do it and made some weird excuse.
That's right. That's right. Because secretly, if they said they would do it because they were people pleasing, but secretly they hated it and they just were trying to get out of it, that would feel frustrating to me. But because the whole story was upfront from the beginning, I didn't take it personally. This is just the way they are. So I know that's easier to do with someone that isn't in your family. Family is a whole different ball of wax with stuff like that. And yet it's probably the only way is to just be honest about what's going on with you.
Yeah, be honest, make it known, change people's expectations. I remember when I lived in DC, back in my more going out days, one of my good friends was a really competitive athlete who would do a ton of triathlons and stuff. And so we all knew that she often was going to have to wake up at 5 a.m. and bike 100 miles and swim 1,000,000 miles. And so she just wasn't going to be out until 2 a.m. So it wasn't personal and we weren't disappointed every time. So I do think if you can kind of just get the messaging out there, it might help. I also don't want this person to skip everything. And I also don't want them to only attend the events that come with the most pressure. Start with your values, not to be dramatic, but when you're on your deathbed, are you going to, whose party are you going to want to say you went to? Who do you want to spend time with? Which people are actually important to you? Versus which people are just kind of annoying and making demands on you. So start with, what do you want the outcome to be at the end of the year, at the end of your life, whatever? Do you want to not have attended any parties? Or do you want to have attended one party a month for someone who's really meaningful to you and been able to show up in a good mood because you're not drained of energy and you haven't done 700 other events? So really think about what you want before you just start saying no willy-nilly. And make sure you're not cutting yourself off from any of the positive sides of socializing.
Yeah. And I also see a couple of alternative paths for this person. They say that they would like to be closer to individual people, but it's possible because there's simply too many of them. But it is possible to say to people I don't think I can make your party, but I am down to meet up for coffee. Let's do that. So that the person doesn't feel personally rejected by your absence from their life. They just recognize that maybe the party isn't your scene. The other option is, and again, only if this resonates with you, you don't have to be at the party for 3 hours chopping it up with everyone. You could go make your appearance, drop your gift, do some hugs, take a picture, and be out in 30 minutes, especially if it's a big party. No one's even paying attention.
I completely agree. Do you know what you have to do? Be the first one to show up.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Be festive. Get the birthday person a drink. Take a picture.
Yeah. Take a picture.
Maybe even post it on social media if that's your thing. You get so much more bang for your buck than showing up when there are 50 people there and staying the whole time.
Yes. And if you're really desperate, spill a drink because then everyone will remember that you were there.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, I remember when they spilled that drink. Just get there and knock a drink over and be out. They're like, I'm so sorry, party foul. And then,
make an impression however you can.
Make an impression. Set the curtains on fire.
So there's a middle ground here. And my last thought is I know that people do care. And Carvell, you're right that things can be intense with family. but also consider the fact that people aren't thinking about you as much as you might think they are. So when this person is creating the Evite or however people invite people to things these days, they're kind of going through all their contacts and inviting everyone.
Yeah.
They're not sitting here going, I'm going to be so mad if this letter writer doesn't show up. He or she is going to make or break the event. They want a good crowd. You expect a third of people to say no anyway. People aren't going to be obsessing over your presence or lack thereof most of the time. Mm-hmm. So don't put too much pressure on yourself when it comes to how people will process it if you're not there.
Right. Yeah, that's good advice.
This is Dear Prudence. We need to take a break, but when we come back, more letters from you and advice from us. Stay tuned.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Bumble knows it's hard to start conversations.
Hey, no, too basic. Hi there. Still no. What about, hello, handsome? Ugh, who knew you could give yourself the ick?
That's why Bumble is changing how you start conversations. You can now make the first move or not. With opening moves, you simply choose a question to be automatically sent to your matches. Then sit back and let your matches start the chat. Download Bumble and try it for yourself.
Welcome back to Dear Prudence. I'm here with my guest, Carvell Wallace, to answer your letters. And the next one is titled, Not All Men, but like two of them.
My very butch lesbian girlfriend has almost entirely positive experiences with men. She passes as a guy when she feels like it. 98% of her friends are men. She works in a field that didn't admit women until the 1990s. She often says she doesn't get women or has experiences that women exclude her. She has a unique and wonderful ability to disarm most men and have them treat her like one of the guys. Even if they don't read her as a man, most men don't read her as a woman. As a result, she seems to avoid most sexism and creepiness, although it's definitely not perfect. But, as a result, she sees the good friend who's always there for his bros or charming grandfatherly man who loves to mentor side of most guys, and is folded into the safety and ease of that. I'm femme and pansexual, not a lesbian. I've dated both crappy and wonderful guys. I've been assaulted, and I've had adult men be creepy since I was 9 or 10, like many women I know. Men do not treat me like a man, and I also have a radar for behavior and language that makes me uncomfortable. And because her social and professional circle is all men, that radar pings occasionally. It's especially bad with one of her friends, who is mildly into incel stuff as an explanation for why women won't date him. She doesn't believe me or understand when I point out that I'm uncomfortable, or his comments about how women don't understand how destructive their rejection is to men isn't a benign, neutral thing. It's like she thinks if they are good to her, then they're good people. I'm so frustrated. Most of her friends and colleagues are great, but when I feel uncomfortable, I want to be listened to. What can I do?
My first thought reading this was that I wonder if the letter writer is overcomplicating it a little bit by sort of drawing this line between her identity and her experiences and how she relates to men compared to her girlfriend's identity and her better experiences with men and what she's willing to put up with. Because I just don't think you have to be personally victimized by a particular kind of oppression to identify that it's not great and to not like it and to not want to be around people who sort of express it. Like, I'm straight, but I would still be pissed and turned off and want to pull away, hang out with someone who is openly homophobic, right? Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't want to be excused by saying, well, she's never personally experienced homophobia, so how could I possibly explain it to her, you know?
Yeah, this letter is really, really interesting. There's so many layers here, actually, of gender. I agree with you that the letter writer may be cutting their partner maybe doing a little bit of explaining away their partner's lack of empathy. And I also think that the explanation isn't, I mean, they're sort of explaining what I think is true for a lot of men anyway, which is that, like, if you move through the world as a man, sometimes the way your experience of people is like, oh, this guy is fine. This guy seems cool. Like, maybe people are overreacting, or maybe people are being unfair to this person. And it's interesting that this person, that their partner is maybe having some of that experience because they're not subject to various kinds of like interactions. But it's not that important. I mean, I think it's an interesting study in gender, and I could go off on it and think about it for a long time, and I probably will. But in terms of what to do within the context of the relationship, this feels to me like a pretty big problem, because you have a partner who is not empathetic or sympathetic to something that is like really important to you.
Right.
And I don't know how, I mean, the assumption here is that by writing it to us, my assumption is that you've already said to your partner, listen, this is a thing that I'm really struggling with, and I need you to like look at this, and I need you to maybe behave differently, and that hasn't happened. If you haven't had that conversation, sure, start with that conversation. Because sometimes people can be like, oh my God, I had no idea I was making you feel this way. I would never want to. I do need to look at that. Let me work on this. That's a possibility. Not saying I fully believe that it's likely, but I know that that's a possibility. But if that's been exhausted, then I think you have a real problem on your hands, because your core sense of safety is not addressed in a caring way by the person that you're in a life partnership with. And hard to fix that.
Yeah, it's a conflict about values. Yeah. And then it's a conflict about how empathetic and understanding and flexible your partner is willing to be when it comes to things that are hurtful and upsetting to you.
Well, can I ask you a question as a person who is straight? When you have been in relationships with men, certainly not all the men you've been with have been able to like understand issues of gender in the full way that you experience them. How have you dealt with that? How that made sense of that? What decisions have you made around that?
So I think I've always dated people who have at least tried. And I think trying is kind of the important part, right? So in this letter, the person's saying she doesn't believe me or understand when I point out that I'm uncomfortable. I think that's what I have not dealt with and wouldn't want to deal with, right? So I can definitely accommodate a certain level of maybe cluelessness or lack of experience. But it's when you start pushing back and say, that doesn't make sense. I haven't experienced that, so it doesn't count, that I would have a really big problem.
Well, that's the sentence that jumped out at me, is she doesn't believe me. And I was like, ew. The word believe really, I was like, uh-oh. That's when all the red flags went up. And then a few spare red flags that I had in the closet came out.
Yeah.
You know, being like, I'm having a hard time understanding where you're coming from, or I'm not sure. I don't really get it is one thing, but being like, I actually don't believe that you are feeling uncomfortable in the way that you say you are is another thing entirely.
Yeah, and if you take all the heaviness out of it and just kind of break it down to its core, you two don't like hanging out with the same people.
Yeah.
That's kind of a relationship deal breaker, right? I mean, that's going to be your lifestyle. Most couples don't have separate social lives. So if you don't enjoy the same kinds of people and you don't have some sort of alignment on, we like this person and we don't like this person. I always say, and Joel says about our marriage, like, we can radicalize each other against people. So I could be neutral on someone, but if he doesn't like them, I'm eventually going to become radicalized against them.
That's funny.
And the same in the other direction.
Yeah.
I think that's a helpful dynamic to have in a relationship, because otherwise you're going to find yourself either at odds or just kind of going your separate ways socially. I
think that's a pretty good rule of thumb to live by. I mean, it also made me wonder in this relationship, and not that it matters, but it made me wonder how big of an issue this was within the context of their relationship as a whole. Because the other thing that struck me here was there was a little bit of a lack of empathy, like just the lack of the primary function of a partner is to be like, or one of the primary jobs is to be like, the way that you feel matters to me. And so that's not happening here. So it made me wonder if that was something that happens elsewhere in the relationship.
There's got to be, right? Don't you always wish we could have the letter writer here and say...
That's what I always wish, because, well, we do that on How To, not to cross promote, but on How To, we do get the letter writers on the show.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I like about that, because you can get these drill down questions, because maybe this relationship is like, my partner is like so caring and empathetic in every other possible way. They're always doing this and drawing baths for me and with the housework and all that. It's just this one thing they seem to have kind of a blind spot. What do I do? That's slightly different advice than like, this is the way it is kind of in a lot of places. And here's the one where it's worse, at its worst.
Yeah, I think I always find myself assuming in about 3 out of 10 letters about relationship problems that the problem that's being described is just a symptom of something else that's got to be present elsewhere.
Yeah, well, this is one of the fundamental debates about advice shows, especially this one. Is just like, do you treat the person who wrote in as though this is the tip of the iceberg for something huge?
Right.
Or do you treat it as though this is the question that they're asking about and that's it?
Yeah.
How much assumption do you make? But yeah,
even though every single person who has, is married to someone who they just happened to find out was a serial killer will say our relationship is otherwise great and he's a wonderful, kind man.
And then I saw a foot in the freezer and that's when I started to wonder. Yeah, totally.
I think when that happens, I have a right to question that everything else is great.
I agree with that. I tend to agree with that.
So far as practical advice for this person, I agree that if the conversation hasn't been had super explicitly in a, hey, we need to talk. When can you sit down and talk about this? This is really bothering me. This is how it's affecting me way. That needs to happen. And if you're still getting a lot of pushback, if you're still getting a lack of empathy, if you're still getting, I don't believe you, I would suggest a broader look at the relationship and where else that might be happening. I suspect there are a few other places. And yeah, if you don't feel ready to break up on the spot, which I understand is tough, I would just start paying close attention to how many weekends, evenings, experiences, and moments are kind of ruined by this dynamic and what that means for how much you're actually enjoying and getting out of the relationship.
That's such great advice. That's really useful. Yeah.
Yeah. Take some notes and then reflect on them and see if this is where you want to be. Good luck.
Good luck.
You're listening to the Dear Prudence Show, and when we come back, we'll be reading more of your letters. Stay with us.
This episode is brought to you by Skinny Pop Popcorn. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Oh, so light and crunchy. Skinny Pop Original Popcorn is the snack you've been searching for. Made with just 3 simple ingredients: popcorn kernels, sunflower oil, and salt. Snacking never felt or tasted so good. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Give yourself permission to snack and pick up Skinny Pop Original Popcorn today.
Hey. It's me, the Quenchies. I'm that late afternoon craving you just can't shake. Wait, what's that? Welch's Grape Aid? No! Made with real fruit and no added sugar, nothing answers the call of the Quenchies like Grape Aid. Got the Quenchies? Grab a Grape Aid in your juice aisle.
I'm Jenée and you're listening to Dear Prudence. Carvell and I are about to tackle our last question for the day. It's titled, High Achiever.
I'm a 13-year-old girl who lives in a big school district. I am in 7th grade, and I'm deciding what high school I'm going to. I recently found out about the International Baccalaureate program, kind of like AP, but harder, and it has different requirements, and I want to do it. The program is only offered at 2 high schools in my district. The first high school is out of the question because with traffic, it would take 45 minutes each way to get there. But the second high school is relatively close, and I really want to go to it because I want to go to a good college. The problem is that the high school is in an urban area and has a reputation of being like a high school with a lot of trouble. So my mom doesn't want me to go there because she doesn't want me to be in that kind of environment. The thing is, I went to the spring showcase and all of the teachers there told me that it's not that bad and that there are fights and drugs at every school. And the teachers who actually attended the high school while they were students sent their kids there too. Instead, my mom wants me to go to a neighborhood high school. I'm a very high achieving student and I have good behavior and don't want to ruin my life by taking drugs. How do I convince my mom that I'm not going to turn bad if I go to high school?
I wish we'd received this letter from the mom because I know you could give some really beautiful parenting advice to her.
I know. I know my main advice for this person is like, tell your mom to listen to whatever we say. Just listen to this podcast. Because,
play it back.
Yeah, play it back.
You wrote in 2021 in a piece for The Nation called My Son is His Own Person and I'm Glad to Know Him. You wrote all about trusting a child to make their own decisions and carve out their own paths and decisions. I'm going to read a longish quote from it. You said, the longer I do this parenting thing, the more I realize that the area over which I have some control is in fact very narrow. I can be present with my son when he shows up. I can listen to him. I can remind myself every day that he learned to crawl on his own, walk on his own, that he learned to eat and talk and communicate, that he learned to understand the world, and that he has made countless mistakes, more than I will probably ever know about, and survived them, grown from them, adjusted his worldview to accommodate the information he learned from them. I can push past my own ego in order to see who he really is. I can appreciate him, both the parts of him that are going the way I want and the parts that are not. Mom, yeah, listen to Carvell.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of this has to do with the age that the letter writer is at, because it's a fairly earth-shattering transition for parents. I mean, obviously for a 13-year-old, it's also a big transition, but I think for parents, your high school is kind of scary anyway, because you're really sending your kid off in a way that maybe you weren't even in middle school. And even in middle school at the beginning, you're sending your kid off in a way that you weren't in elementary school. And at the beginning of elementary school, you're sending them off in a way that you weren't in preschool, et cetera, et cetera. It's nothing but versions of sending kids off. That's all it is for the entire time. But the high school one is scary because you know that they're going out into a world where people are doing adult type things, and you're terrified of this. You're gonna leave them at the school campus, and they're gonna get in there, and kids are gonna have drugs, and they're gonna have guns, and they're gonna drive, and they're gonna be having sex, and it's gonna be like your little precious baby is out there with what you think of in your mind as like these huge grown-ups who are just out there doing horrifying things, and there's no way your child can survive in that environment. It's interesting that the kid is under the impression that the mother's main fear is that the kid's going to turn bad.
Right. Not get hurt or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure. The kids have been known to sometimes misunderstand what their parents' fears are, and parents have been known to not communicate well what they, so there could be a misunderstanding here, because sure, that could be part of it. And I don't know, but it's also possible that your parent is just worried that something bad will happen to you, And I think for the parent, I would say that if you think that your local high school is free of like kids doing drugs and making terrible, dangerous, harmful decisions, I beg of you, if technology allows you to be a fly on the wall and hang out with this group of kids, do it, because you will find that the kids at your local high school are doing as many terrible and shameful things and dangerous things as the kids are across town. It's just you don't know it.
I mean, don't we all kind of know that? I mean, studies meaning all of our anecdotal experience, that, I mean, obviously the quote unquote urban school that might be lower resource might have its own problems. But please believe that the most privileged kids are doing the most wild and crazy stuff.
Worst
and the
stuff.
hardest drugs.
It's just it never ends up on the news, and there's never, because there's no and they don't have the metal detectors and all this. We get it. So like, you're not going to keep your kids safe from stuff. And whether they go to this school or that school, they're not going to be kept from the stuff, nor do they need to be, because they're going to figure it out. There's a reason why that school has that program that is successful. There's a reason why the teachers of that school send their own kids to that school, because the stuff, whatever stuff that you're afraid of, is clearly not a huge onslaught that just immediately consumes everyone who walks in the door.
Right.
Like, you can basically figure out what's what and like navigate through that school successfully. Do kids graduate from that school? Do they go on to become, to go to Ivy League schools or have jobs or be happy, healthy members of society? Are they able to do so without bullet wounds? If so, then it's possible for your daughter to do that. And you probably need to give your daughter the opportunity to learn how to do that.
Another thing I always think about parenting during high school, and of course I don't know anything, I have a 2-year-old, is that it must be really tough, because on the one hand you have this little 13-year-old who's a kid, and last year they were in middle school and you want to protect them.
Yeah.
On the other hand, in 4 years, assuming they go to college or decide to be on their own and exercise their rights at 18, they're going to do whatever they want. So how do you sort of navigate that transition from you're my little baby to I need to at least give you a little bit of a runway onto the part of your life where I have no say in what you do, and you can stay out all night and you can go to any part of town and hang out with anyone. I remember there was a fight on Twitter about someone who was the parent of a 15-year-old who was saying the kid like didn't eat their dinner. And so they just kept reserving it to them and wouldn't let them have any snacks or something. And I was just thinking, well, first of all, that's insane. But second of all, what do you think they're going to do a few years from now when they can eat anything they want? What's your plan for getting them to be a person who can make responsible decisions? I don't know what the answer is, but it can't be that you 100% protect and control the person until their 18th birthday and then say, do whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction to make, the difference between like parenting through control and parenting through like teaching and allowing for learning to happen, even if you're not the one doing the teaching. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is that the main thing I think that you want for your teenage kids is that they have the ability to make reasonable decisions when they're confronted with options. Mm-hmm. And that's work that begins when they're in kindergarten and all the way through. And you want them, the second thing, which is equally as important, is you want them to be able to communicate with you about their decisions and feel comfortable and safe enough with you to do that. And so parenting all through those single digit years, I always say, is about making sure they call you when they're 15 and they have questions. That's what the parenting is for. And that if they don't have questions, that they don't have questions because they actually know what the right thing to do is.
Right.
And so you have to let your kid go into the world and figure out what to do. And that's what it is here. And like, this school clearly has advanced academic opportunities that your child is really interested in. I also would say the final thing, if none of that gets through to you, my advice to the parent is, if you don't let your kid go to this school, you will pay for that for the rest of her adolescence.
Yeah.
Like, you will pay for that. Like, she will not forget it. It will corrode your relationship. It will eat away at your relationship in ways that you cannot yet predict, but I advise against even finding out about.
Right. And she's going to start making a whole bunch of other decisions that she doesn't have to weigh in with you about at the neighborhood school with all its problems.
That's right.
You've written and talked about how going to a performing arts school in California sort of shaped your whole career trajectory and set you on a different path. So, I mean, it is true that going to a high school that speaks to your interests, that values who you are, where you're passionate about what you're learning and what you're doing every day, can make a huge difference in someone's life. And so I hope the mom thinks about that too.
Yeah, and it was so huge. My mother let that happen. It was a huge, I mean, I kind of was on my own, but she was like, I'm not going to stop you. So then I had to take the bus across town for the audition, and that, commute from Van Nuys to East LA by bus, like the crazy stuff that I did. But it was like, my mother was like, if you're interested, go do it. And that school, there were a lot of things going on at that school that your parents would not want to know that were going on. And that was supposed to be a good school with good kids who were focused and got good grades and were motivated. And classical opera singers were offering you heroin behind the parking lot. It's high school. That's just what happens in high school. And so you learn how to navigate some of these things. And that's just part of being alive.
Yeah. So, okay, we want the letter writer to play this for her mom, but what's some actual advice for her? The only thing I can think of, maybe identify some graduates of the school who've thrived and done well. I mean, don't kids make PowerPoint presentations for their parents now? Isn't that how they try to convince them with more screen time or whatever they want?
My kids exactly made PowerPoint presentations about screen time for us.
Yeah. So include in your PowerPoint presentation something about all the successful graduates. Maybe invite her over there to go talk to the teachers who you talk to hear that perspective from another adult.
Yeah, the third one I would say is, or maybe get some quotes from some of those teachers that you want to share with your mom. And then the other thing I would say is that you can do it on a conditional basis.
Yeah.
You can say to your mom, all right, well, how about you just let me go for 1 year? And if we decide after the end of 1 year that we don't like it, then we can re-enter the discussion.
Yeah, a trial freshman year.
A trial freshman year. Yeah,
and you can even bring other things to the negotiating table, like a curfew that your mom might feel comfortable with, or whatever it is that you think just might make her feel more comfortable with this. But most of all, play back this segment.
Yeah.
And good luck. Those are all the questions we have for this week. It's been fun and hopefully helpful. Thank you so much, Carvell.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed this.
I enjoyed it too. You can purchase Carvell's new memoir, Another Word for Love, and read more of his writing on his website, carvellwallace.com. Listen to him weekly on Slate's How To podcast. Do you need help getting along with partners, relatives, coworkers, and people in general? Write to me. Go to slate.com/Prudie. That's slate.com/PRUDIE. The Dear Prudence column publishes every Thursday.
If you'd like to hear your question answered on the podcast, we are looking for letter writers who would be comfortable reading their questions for the show. You can stay anonymous.
Dear Prudence is produced by Se'era Spragley Ricks and me, Jenée Desmond-Harris, with a special thanks to Maura, Currie, and Ononye. Editorial help from Paola de Verona. Daisy Rosario is senior supervising producer, and Alicia Montgomery is Slate's VP of audio. I'm your dear Prudence, Jenée Desmond-Harris. That's all for this episode, but join us on today's episode of Prudie Plus, where Carvell stuck around and where we answered a letter about if wanting your neighbors to adhere to a stricter social contract makes you a racist. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/Prudie Plus to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available for you to listen to right now. We'll see you there.